Hello, everybody. This is Jacob Jans with Writing Launch. I'm very excited to welcome you to today's webinar. We're going to be starting very soon. If you're here, let us know you're here in the comments. I really look forward to Ian's presentation today. So if you're here, once again, say hello in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Ian is going to be putting together a great presentation about freelance blogging today. So we're very excited for the presentation. And we have a lot of people here today. Hello, Patrick, and hi, Stephen. It's good to hear from you. It's good to know that the audio is getting through. If you have any issues with that, let us know in the comments now. Now's the time to make sure everything's working. So hello, everybody. Hi, Audrey. YouTube says we have about 100 people watching live right now. That's pretty exciting. It's neat to always see the variety of people that show up to our live webinars. And as the webinar is happening, think of questions that you might want to ask Ian. And at the end of the session, we will be doing a live Q&A where he will answer your questions. And you can post those questions in the comment box below the video screen. So without any further ado, here is Ian.
Thank you, Jacob. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to see all of you here today. I just wanted to take a moment right off the bat and thank you for coming here and spending some time with us and joining us. My goal for the next hour is to give you as much information as possible. It's all going to be centered around the topic of blog writing, and this is perfect for freelance writers who are, maybe if you're starting out, you don't really know what you want to specialize in, you're not really sure where your place is as a writer, then this webinar is going to be perfect for you. And as Jacob said, please feel free to ask questions at the end. You can pop them in the chat even as I'm talking. If you can think of questions, go ahead and send them in. So what I'm going to be doing is taking all this information from our Breaking the Blog Writing course, going to go through with the roadmap that I took as a freelance writer, as a freelance blog writer. I'm going to be talking about what blog writing entails and why it's so beneficial. And I'm going to be showing you how you can do that for yourself. So without further ado, let me migrate over to the slides. Okay. Whoops. There we go. All right. So like I said, this information is all coming from our Breaking the Blog Writing course. And that's a 4-week course, but I've distilled a lot of that most important information into the next hour. Right off the bat, I want to talk about 3 problems that I'm going to help you solve in this webinar. Once you leave this webinar, hopefully these problems will be completely solved for you. The one is going to be how to find writing jobs. And this is a super common question that we get. It seems that finding writing jobs is really difficult no matter what your experience level is, no matter what your skill level is. It can be really tricky, and I've dealt with that myself. So instead of having to navigate that yourself, I'll show you step by step how you can find great writing jobs. I'll also show you how to create better article pitches. If your goal is to get published in a magazine or a blog or any sort of online publication, really, then this is going to be really vital information for you. If you've pitched before, you know that the pitching can often be the hardest part. And if you're brand new to it, don't worry, we'll go over it step by step just for that. And then third, of course, is going to be how to leverage those relationships that you build with editors. And this is something that is a pretty new addition to this webinar. I wanted to add it in because I felt like it's an integral part of how you can sort of climb the ladder, if you will, as a freelance writer. So let's get started solving these 3 problems. A few things. First off, what is blog writing? If you haven't heard of it before, it's basically, the way that I define this, is writing articles for online publications that accept submissions from freelancers. So it is different from blogging in that you don't have to have your own blog. You're writing for other people's sites, for other people's blogs. And this is a much better method because that way you don't have to put any of the work into building an audience or getting things up and running. You get a platform automatically, and you can get paid for writing for that platform. So it's really a win-win. And I always recommend this to writers who are considering starting a blog because I say, no, wait, hey, you don't have to do all that hard work. You can take this shortcut, and it's much more beneficial. It's much easier, and it's going to save you a lot of time, energy, and money. So this is how I define blog writing. So keep this in mind while we're discussing this for the rest of the webinar. Something else that I really wanted to nail is that you do not need a portfolio to get started with blog writing. And this is a common myth that I run into. And I've had a lot of writers tell me that they would love to get started with blog writing, but they just don't have any work published. They don't have a portfolio. Well, you do not need one. And I will go into detail why you don't. But the gist of it is that if you have good writing, that's all you need. And that's really all you need to make a career as a freelance writer in any way. You need to be a good writer. You need to be able to solve problems for people. You need to be able to provide value for people. And if you can do that, you don't need any portfolio. You don't need any experience. You just need, the skills, the know-how, and the drive, and also the right marketing, really, the right way to sell yourself, to put yourself out there. And I'm going to be talking about all of that today. But I just wanted to hit that home that if you're sitting there, just thinking, oh, I don't have a portfolio, I can't do this. I just wanted to kind of squash that objection because it is truly just a myth. So why choose blog writing? If maybe you haven't considered it before, or maybe you've really considered it before and you're still on the fence, let me go over some of the big reasons why you should choose blog writing. First of all, it's a very lucrative opportunity and it has so much room for growth. I've been able to grow my entire career mostly based on blog writing, and that's how I've gotten to where I am today. Making a living full-time solely off freelance writing. That's the sort of trajectory that you can replicate. And of course, we're not guaranteeing success for anyone, but still, when you compare it to a lot of the other types of writing, this is definitely, at least in my experience, one of the most lucrative paths that you can take. And it pays so much better than content mills or freelancing platforms. And listen, I know that a lot of you are on these mills and these platforms right now. I know a lot of you are on Upwork or Fiverr or Freelancer or whatever the popular one is today. But if you're on there, I want you to know that there is a much better alternative that's easier for you, that takes less work, and that will pay you much better. It's truly the antidote to content mills and freelancing platforms. So if you're on a mill or a platform right now, I highly urge you to stick around for the rest of the webinar and see what blog writing has to offer for you, because I think you will greatly prefer it to what you're going through now. It's super easy to get started. And like I said, even if you have no experience, that doesn't matter. If you have no portfolio, that doesn't matter. The barrier of entry is so low that anyone can get started. Anyone can get published and paid for it. And ultimately, it's fun. It's fun to write about the kinds of topics that you want to write about for audiences that care about what you're writing about, and it's really rewarding in that way. Now that I've gone over that, I want to talk about my own personal freelance writing roadmap. This is sort of the path that I followed as a freelance writer for the first few years of my career. And I want to talk about where I stumbled and then present you with a better alternative that I think will fix a lot of the problems that I went through. I started out on a freelancing platform, and I regret that for a lot of reasons, and it's one reason that I don't recommend them. There's a lot of reasons why, but that's just one of them. And I was doing work for just peanuts. I was making pocket change, and sometimes not even that. I was doing like $5 gigs for like $250 worth. So I was making about like a penny a word. So it wasn't good. And I had no career ahead of me at that point. If I had continued, writing 250 words for $5, then I wouldn't have gotten anywhere. I wouldn't have been able to grow into the writer that I am today. And, what I found was that ultimately led to having not enough money. I wasn't able to pay my bills, no career possibilities, like I mentioned, and I was just wasting a lot of my time. I was writing copy for, random clients that it would never go anywhere, and a lot of it was for these weird spammy websites, and I couldn't choose who I worked with, and it was a real problem, and I wanted to find a better way. And I was thinking to myself, there has to be something better, there has to be something greater. And that's when I really started looking at blogs and online publications. When you're starting out as a freelance writer, there are a couple avenues you can take, and this is just the one that I gravitated toward. And when I explored them, where I saw how easy it was to get started without needing a lot of experience or this huge portfolio. And I was able to, it was actually a lot easier than getting jobs on this freelancing platform, because when I was on that freelancing platform, it was just very convoluted the way I had to get work. And then, on a lot of platforms, you have to bid for work. And with submitting to blogs and online publications, it was a lot easier. It was a lot more straightforward. And I found that led to really high paying work. I was finding jobs that paid very, very well. And then I got extra job and networking opportunities as a result of that. So I was able to connect with editors, and that's what I'll talk about later today. And I was able to really climb the ladder. And so as a result of that, I was able to achieve really consistent work. I became a contributing writer for multiple blogs, and I even became an editor for one. For a while. And it led to so many good opportunities that I'm so grateful for. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't broken out of the freelancing platform and looked for something better. And so my question for you is, maybe you're taking a similar roadmap to this, but where are you on this roadmap? And even if you haven't used a freelancing platform, are you on the side of, struggling with making enough money, not having career possibilities? Are you, kind of finding some high paying work and job and networking opportunities? Or are you, at that stage where you've kind of made it? Because if you've made it, that's great. But I know a lot of you are still struggling to get to that point. So if you're in the stage where you're, having trouble finding good work, when you're having trouble making enough money, when you're wasting all that time, if that's you right now, then I'll definitely be able to help you, because those are the problems that I was able to solve for myself. And my goal is to provide you that information so that you don't make the same mistakes that I did. So let's go on and talk about some more nuances about blog writing, because blog writing, it's not for every single writer in the world, right? I think it's a fantastic opportunity, but it does require some things, and you just need to kind of evaluate whether it's for you. And I think it will be right for a lot of you, but I wanted to go into this with a little disclaimer about what it entails. Blog writing is going to require working with deadlines, of course. If that's something that you struggle with, then it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. Generally, the deadlines aren't super tight, but occasionally they can get like that, so you do need to be prepared for that. It does require really thorough research, which will require you to really, hone your researching skills, get those in, really learn how to use different databases, how to use Google a lot. We're going to be talking about that today. It requires, and this is a big one, the ability to fill in the blanks. A lot of times you will get like almost no information for an article, and you have to create the structure, the format, all yourself. And you may have to write an entire article just based on the title or even a topic. That's something that I've had to do a lot. And once you get used to it, it's really easy, but it can be a little difficult to learn at first, especially if you're a person who really requires, a lot of rules to go off of. But once you learn it and master it, it's really beneficial as a writer to have that ability to just be able to create an entire article just based on a single prompt. And it might also require some additional work. You might have to find some media like pictures or videos. You might have to put some keywords in a topic. Usually that is not really, it's not really common, but it can happen sometimes, like probably 1 out of every 100 times you'll have to do that. So I just wanted to throw that in because it does happen sometimes. And of course, it's going to require self-motivation and time and task management. You're going to be, especially if you're juggling multiple writings at once, multiple posts, then it's going to be something you'll have to juggle. And you're going to have to, be good with prioritization and things like that. And I've just kind of gone over that briefly. So what I wanted to do is send you a bonus called "Is Blog Writing for You?" This is going to be this is actually the first lesson in our blog writing course, rather, and it's basically going to go into depth more on what blog writing entails, and it's going to pose some questions that will help you decide whether blog writing is really a path that is suited for your personal writing style. And if it's not, that's perfectly great. but if it is, and I think it will be for a lot of you, then you can get a better idea of what it's like to be a blog writer and what it's like to go through these processes, and then, ultimately decide whether it's for you. So we're going to be sending that to your email over the next few days. Keep an eye out for that. And I think you'll be excited about a couple of things, a couple other surprises that we have coming up in the webinar for you. So moving forward, let's say that you are interested in blog writing, and I hope you are if you're still hanging around with us, because I think it's a great thing, and I always evangelize it because it really helped me build my career, and I know that it will help a lot of you build your careers too. And really, when you break it down, it can be as simple as 2 steps. So I've made this a really easy 2-step process. Step 1 is to find blogs in your niche. And step 2 is to pitch article ideas to those blogs. And that's really, when it comes down to it, that's the essence of blog writing. This is all you need to focus on to build a career off writing for blogs. So I'm going to go into detail on each of these points. So let's start with finding blogs in your niche. And this is often a big stumbling block for a lot of writers. They don't really know where to look. They don't even know where to start to look. It's very intimidating. So my goal is to break it down and show you how you can systematically find blogs in your niche that pay well and that you can get published on. First of all, you have to go into it knowing what to look for. This is really big. A lot of writers will look in the wrong places, and it really sets them back. What you want to be looking for is medium level blogs. And what I mean by that is a blog that has a large readership, but not so large that they have their own staff writers, their own ecosystem. You want to find blogs that are somewhere in the middle of really dinky mom and pop blogs and then really big corporate blogs. You want to be right in the middle of that. And it's a lot easier to find than you think because there are so many blogs that occupy that space. And the reason that you want to look for medium level blogs is because those really small blogs, they often can't afford to pay writers. And so it's really not worth pursuing that. And large blogs often don't pay writers as well because they argue that they provide exposure. And this is probably something that you've heard a lot. It's really sad to see, but unfortunately that's the scenario that we're dealing with. But the solution is to look for those blogs that are in the middle. So not like the New York Times and not like some blog you've never heard of, but right in the middle. And like I said, it's a lot easier to find than you might think once you start looking. Now, how do you identify a medium level blog? What are the traits that you can look for? Because if I just leave it at that, if I say medium level blogs, that could mean a lot to different people. One of you could be thinking that this certain blog is a medium level blog, and someone else could think it's a high level or blog. So how do you identify them? One way to look is to look for lots of bylined authors. So if a blog has a lot of authors, different writers, then that's a really good sign that they're in that medium level. And the reason is because medium level blogs, and of course this is the reason that I'm recommending them, they often outsource their writing to different freelancers around the world, and of course they give them credit. And that's how they build their blog, is through this ecosystem of having different writers from around the world contribute their perspective. And it's a lot like something like a literary journal in that way. So if you can find lots of bylined authors on a blog, that is a very, very good sign. You can also look for an active comment section. If there is a thriving, healthy comment section under each post, then that's a really good sign that they're getting a lot of readers, that they're getting a lot of attention, and that it's another kind of mark of quality for the blog. You can also see if they have an active social media presence or active social media comment section. And this is actually useful in many ways, because if they don't, then that might actually mean that the blog has since folded, because a lot of blogs won't announce when they fold. They just kind of, sputter out. So you can use that to find that too. But also if they have a really good, healthy social media presence, if they're getting a lot of engagement there, a lot of comments, that's also a really good sign of quality. And also maybe positive press, like being featured on other blogs or being linked to by other blogs. If you've heard of it before, that's a really good sign. But even if you haven't, if it seems like the blog has made a name for itself, then that's also a really good sign that it's in this medium level. So look for all of these things when you're out doing your research. Don't just rely on one of these things. Really take the time to do some research, to look around. It will pay off in the end. Now, I want to talk about some Google search techniques to find blogs. Google is the only research tool that I use, and that can confuse people sometimes because a lot of people are used to Google as just a really simple search engine where you type in, a question and it gives you an answer. It's a really simple kind of thing. But what most people don't know is that Google has a lot of searching techniques that you can take advantage of to refine your search and to get better results, more relevant results. And I'm going to be going over those really briefly. So let's use an example. Let's say your niche is spirituality. How would you search in Google to find blogs in the spirituality niche? I want you to think about that for a second. What search term would you put in? What would you type into Google to find blogs in the spirituality niche? Some common phrases might just be spirituality blogs, or blogs about spirituality. Those are kind of the first things that people often think of. But when you use these advanced search operators, it will really refine your search. And let me show you what that looks like. It looks like something like this. And I'll break this down. Of course, spirituality is just the topic, whatever you want to write about. It could be anything. It could be finance. It could be parenting. And then let me focus on the writer's guidelines part. The writer's guidelines part is important because, as I'll talk about in a moment, all these blogs are going to have writer's guidelines pages, right? And if you've submitted to a blog, you're familiar with this page. It's the page that tells you everything about the submission process. And so you want to look for sites that have that, because that means that they're accepting articles from freelancers. And so that's another search term that you're including. Those quotation marks, what those are doing is ensuring that you're only getting results that have the entire phrase writer's guidelines. So if you didn't have those, you would get some pages that only had the word guidelines or only had the word writers. And you want to make sure that you're looking for the specific title of a specific page, so you want to pair those together. So what those quotation marks are doing is pairing those words together into one, essentially a compound noun. And then the plus is just joining those together, and it's saying, hey, Google, only give me results that have both of these exact terms. So it's a little almost like a math equation, but once you get the hang of it, it's extremely straightforward, and you can use that on a lot of other with a lot of other search terms. So some blogs will have a Write for Us page. Some will have a submission guidelines page. Some will call it a guest post page. And you can use, any synonym that you want, any title that might relate to writer's guidelines, or or writing for us, or submissions, or whatever. And you can use this general formula, no matter the niche, to find blogs in your niche. And so I just wanted to go over this really briefly because this is a really powerful tool, and I recommend that you learn this, get it down, master it. Find out some of the other search operators on Google. You can just type it into Google, Google search operators, and it will give you a list of all of them. But I think these are the most important ones. These will really, really help you refine your search. If you've been having trouble searching before, then this is really going to help you. So take some time, get used to this format, and you're going to really benefit from it. And like I said, you need to be looking for a writer's guidelines page. I briefly mentioned that that's the page. If you've submitted, that's the page that contains all the information about the submission guidelines, what you need to do in order to get published on that blog. And it's also going to have all the information that you need in order to pitch them. It's got information about everything from payment to how to contact editors, everything. Of course, that payment information is really important because the writer's guidelines page is going to tell you whether the publication pays in the first place. Because if they don't, then you want to think twice about submitting to them, because of course, if your goal is to get paid, then you want to make sure that you're finding blogs that will pay you. We've gotten a lot of the comments about, sort of having trouble knowing if publications pay or not. Well, this is where you look, the writer's guidelines page. And you want to learn to read this very carefully. It's the most important document that you can read in terms of pitching a publication. It has all the information you need, and if you don't follow it, really, you might be rejected. That happens a lot because publications have specific guidelines for what they want in a pitch, and if they don't meet that, because think of it this way. Think of how many pitches the average blog gets a day. It can be, it might be 10, it might be 100, it might be 200. Like there is a lot of volume when it comes to the pitches that these editors have to deal with. So if they see a pitch that doesn't meet all of the guidelines, they might just immediately reject that because they don't have time to go through every single pitch that's less than perfect for them, right? So if you don't meet all of those guidelines, you very well may be rejected, and that happens a lot. So this is just why you want to pay close attention to this page, get familiar with it, and make sure that you're meeting all of the guidelines when you go to pitch them. Now, I wanted to send you another bonus because I know that I talked about how to find blogs, but I really want to make it as easy for you as possible. So I'm going to be sending you the Paid Publishing Guidebook. And this is by far one of my favorite resources that we offer. This is a huge list of 654 magazines and websites and blogs that pay. And of course, some of these are print only, but a lot of them, most of them are online and or print. So I just wanted to give this to you because this is the resource that I wish I had had when I was starting. We've done all the hard work for you. We've compiled all of the information for hundreds of writers' guidelines pages all in one place for you. It's been updated. It's been expanded. Like I said, it's one of my favorite resources. And if you're looking for blogs to write for, this is going to solve so many of your problems. It's going to cut back dramatically on the time that you spend looking for great blogs because we've done all that hard work for you. So I think you will really enjoy this. Like I said, this will be coming to your email over the next few days. Now let's talk about that step 2, how to pitch blogs. So I've talked about how to find blogs. And let's say you found a good blog, you're interested in writing for it, you've read the writer's guidelines. What next? Well, ideally, you should be a reader of the blog. And I know this isn't going to happen all the time, but if you're familiar with the blog's content, that's going to really, really pay off when it comes to submitting to them. And at the very least, you need to read 5 to 10 articles from the blog. This is an absolute must. Like I don't think there's a good way that you can not read the blog's content and then be able to pitch them content that they'll want to publish. Because if you're not familiar with the content, how can you come up with content that's going to be what they want to publish? So it's really not that difficult. It takes maybe 10, 15 minutes of research, but it really, really will pay off in the end. And when you're reading these articles, don't just passively read them. You want to be thinking like a writer. You want to be analyzing them for content and for style. You want to be thinking about, what voice it's written in, how it's formatted, who the audience is. All these kinds of things should be on your mind when you're reading these articles, because then that's going to make the article that you pitch to them that much better. So, for instance, when it comes to the content, think of, just what are they about? What's the topic here? What kind of details at work? How is the writer going about, describing this topic, going into detail about this topic? Maybe style, what kind of writing voice is used? How are the articles structured? These are pretty simple questions, but when you are gathering research on, kind of recon in a way, it's going to prove incredibly helpful. And overall, it's going to give you just a really solid knowledge of what topics the blog publishes, what they want in articles, and then who their audience is. And all of those are key parts that you'll need to know when you pitch them, because that's going to really make your pitch stand out from everybody else's. Once you've done that, once you've sort of, you've selected a blog, you've read the content, you've gotten an idea of what they want in an article, then go ahead and brainstorm anywhere from, I'd say, 5 to 15 article ideas. You don't want to brainstorm too many, but you do want to have enough so that you can pick from the best ones and then refine them. And when you are brainstorming, after you've brainstormed, you have a list in front of you. What you want to ask yourself is, could you realistically see the blog publishing these articles? And be honest with yourself, because some ideas aren't going to make it, right? But the best ones are going to survive, and then ultimately one will go through. And so you want to compare them to existing articles on the blog. They need to be similar yet different. So they need to appeal to the same audience. They need to be on a similar topic, but of course you don't want to write about something that they've already written about. A good example would be Freedom with Writing, a great site that I know almost everyone here is familiar with. they have an article called 7 Magazines That Pay Writers 150 or More Per Article. And already from this this title, you can get a really good idea of who the audience is, what the purpose is. And so you want to think about how can you write a similar article that hits a lot of the same points, that addresses the same audience, that solves the same problems, but it's not the same thing. So maybe a potential article that you could pitch to them would be 9 trade publications that pay $200 more per article. So it's a very similar kind of format, but it addresses it addresses the same audience, but a completely different topic. It's not magazines, it's trade publications, and we're at a different pay level. So even small changes like that can really be enough to send you over the edge and to make your articles appeal to editors. And also, when you're going about this, really ultimately think about the readers, because the readers are who make the blog thrive. So you want to think about what type of article will they want the most? What will they like the most? And to do this, I mean, there are many ways to go about it. You can one great way is to check the comments on both the publication's site and the social media accounts. If it's a blog that has comments on the site, read those, get an idea of what people are liking, and then go on their social media accounts, see how people are interacting with the content, see what people are saying there. You could just stumble upon a comment where people are saying, "Oh, we want this article," and then you can just go and write that article. It can be that simple sometimes. And see if they're asking for or talking about specific articles or topics. See what comes up in conversation often. It's simple research. It's really simple research, but it can do a lot for you. Now, once you've spent time thinking about which of your articles would benefit the blog's readers the most, and you've gone through all of this kind of mental process, you want to settle on just, of course, one idea to pitch. And overall, you want to pitch like you would for a print publication. I'm not going to go super in depth into pitching here because I could talk about that for hours, and we have a whole course on it. But I do want to give you some of the most essential information. So you want to start with a short intro, nothing too lengthy. And overall, your pitch needs to be pretty short. And by short, I mean 1 to 2 concise paragraphs of about 2 to 3 sentences each. Anything longer is going to be really heavy-handed. It's going to, make the editor kind of have to really sit down, and read a long pitch. I've seen some people who write pitches so long that they're an entire page of Microsoft Word, or it's basically that it's almost like they're writing the article in the pitch. And I always say don't do that, because what editors are looking for is that preview, that little nugget. They want the essence of your article. They don't want the whole thing in the pitch. So keep the pitch short, because editors are busy. They are pressed for time. The shorter the pitch is, the more grateful they will be, and the more likely it is that you will get through and get published. And then something I do is end with a question, because when we hear a question, just as humans, we're inclined to respond. And I found that this really helps encourage the editor to respond back to you, because if you just end saying thanks for your time, the editor doesn't really feel any obligation to really respond necessarily. It depends on the type of editor you get. If someone's really busy, a question is a good way to breaking through to them and really getting them to pay attention to what your pitch said. It engages them more. It's just taking advantage of the way we are wired as human beings. And it's a really powerful technique. I highly recommend that you try it. And it can be something like, does this sound good? I can have this ready by Friday. Does that sound good to you? It can be as simple as that. And then after a week or two, follow up if you haven't gotten a response. Now, this window of time will vary depending on the size of the blog, but I think a week or two is a good happy medium. And a polite, well-timed follow-up can often mean the difference between publication and rejection. This has happened a lot. I've seen this happen, and it's about thinking about how busy editors are, and then realizing that maybe they didn't see your first pitch, or maybe they saw it and wanted to get around to it, but they just forgot because they were so busy. So if you have a really polite, a really a well-timed week or two follow-up, then that might maybe they'll see that and then go, oh, I remember your pitch. I'm interested in your piece. And this can really, really, really cement the difference between getting published and then not getting published. So make sure that you do that for every one of your pitches. Excuse me. All right, now what I wanted to do is outline a pitch that I sent a while back. I wanted to just really quickly analyze it and show you what my pitching process looks like, what a pitch of mine looks like. So you can already see it's really short. Some of these paragraphs are just in one sentence. And this might look a lot different than the pitch that you're used to writing, and that's totally fine. Because pitching is something that you have to do so much. I mean, this took me years to master this pitching style and to really even think about this pitching style. But it works so incredibly well. So let me highlight a few things about this pitch. Notice how, well, at first I just address the editor by name. I say, I came across the site. I'm very interested. And then I go right into what the article is about. I say, my article will explain blah, blah, blah. I'll go over this. I just, I have this section right here is 4 sentences. It's 4 short sentences. And it just talks about the meat of the content of the article that I want to write. And just, you can take a second and read it. But, I go step by step into what I'm going to do. I just lay it out really plainly. I'm not, when I'm pitching, I'm not trying to build a lot of interest in the article necessarily. I'm not trying to build a lot of detail. I just want to provide the essential information and then talk about why it's going to be so good for the readers. So if you'll notice, I say, it'll help sites rank better, help give a blog more authority and value to visitors. I'm talking about the benefits that this article is going to give to the blog's readers. And then I say, I'll discuss this. I'll point to examples like this, and it's all very substantial, yet it's short. Then I say, a little bit about me. I just link my portfolio. If I didn't have a portfolio, and I know I've talked about, not needing one, I would just say, a little about me. I'm a freelance writer who writes about this and this and this. And then that's it. Don't make a big deal about not having a portfolio. You want to put the focus on the pitch. And if you'll notice, even here, I have a really substantial portfolio, but I just throw in one sentence about it. I have a 1-line bio. I'm not trying to impress anyone with my credentials. I'm trying to impress people with the idea that I have. And then, of course, I end with that question. I say, I have this ready in a week. Does that sound good? Thanks. So it's a really concise pitch, but it did the job, and I got the article. I got accepted, and it was one of the most fun articles that I had written at the time. So that's an example of a pitch that worked. So and we talked about pitching before. If you go back and let's look at some of our other webinars, you can learn more about pitching. And of course, like I said, we have a whole entire course on it because it's such an in-depth topic. But I thought I would just give you the gist of what that pitching process looks like. And to help you out even more, I'm going to be sending you a 3rd bonus. This is going to be the last bonus from the webinar. And it's my road-tested pitch template. And what I did for this was I looked at all my pitches, and I asked myself, what's so successful about these pitches? What worked? And I found that all of my successful pitches, shared characteristics. And so what I did was I combined them and I consolidated them into one pitch template. And I'm going to give that pitch template to you so that you can just fill it out and send it. Now, of course, I think you should add, your own personality to it, because the more you customize it, the more true to yourself it's going to be. But I wanted to give you this outline so you had a starting point. I don't want to leave anyone in the dark here. So this is going to be coming to your inbox over the next few days, and I think you'll really, really enjoy it. Now, let me talk about connecting with editors briefly. Connecting with editors means more than just getting published. It means developing relationships that can open new doors for you. And this is a really important facet of blog writing, because if you develop these strong relationships, if you get to know editors, then you'll have a bigger network. You'll have someone who can vouch for you. You can have someone that can introduce you to new opportunities. And that's ultimately what you want. So let me talk briefly about cultivating these relationships. You really want to you want to focus on building good rapport with editors, and how you can do that is by, of course, right off the bat, you want to be reading and following the publication's guidelines, because that shows that you care about your pitch. That shows that you cared enough to read and follow all of their guidelines, and that's kind of the first hurdle you have to get over in order to even be considered for publication. So it's really getting off on the right foot. And then, of course, you want to maintain a polite, professional tone with the editor. Don't talk like you would to a friend. You want to talk like you would to a colleague or to a boss even. You want to make sure that you're staying professional throughout. And of course, respect the editor's time. And what I mean by that is when you're corresponding with them, try to avoid long-winded responses. Ask what you need to ask in the shortest amount of white space possible. Now, after you've gotten published, you do have an in with that editor, and that can be very useful. And you can use that to, let me talk about how you can leverage that sort of in that I mentioned. The first step, of course, is getting published on the blog, right? But then that can lead to maybe pitching more articles to the blog, because once you have the in with that editor, you've already, you've kind of gotten to know each other. They've gotten an idea of your style. You might pitch another article to that blog, and they'll say, okay, yeah, I like your style. We had a good first article. Let's do more together. And then that can lead to, pitching more and more articles and getting published on that blog several times. And I've done that a lot. And then eventually that could lead to becoming a staff or a contributing writer for that blog, which also I have done, and it's pretty common. It depends on the blog, certainly, but that is certainly a really realistic, practical path that you can follow. And then, of course, that can help you gain experience, and you have a good reference in the editor. And, of course, even if you don't become a staff or contributing writer, once you have those articles published, you can just use those in your portfolio, and then you've built up a portfolio. So if you don't have a portfolio, this is a great way to get one started, and then that will enable you to get more work, because now you'll have a portfolio, now you have experience to point to, and that will make it even easier for you to get work. You could even just repeat this process of getting published on different blogs. You don't ever need to mention a portfolio necessarily, but this is a really good way to just get started in making a portfolio and then getting more work because of that. And then ultimately, all of these roads kind of end in using this experience to get more work and build your career. That's one of the things that you're looking for. That's one of the goals that you're looking to accomplish. No matter if you are a staff writer or if you just have one article published, ultimately you can use that experience to get more work, build your career, improve yourself as a writer. So in summary, find the medium-sized blogs in your niche. Like I said, the ones that aren't super big but not super small, and I talked about some characteristics of medium-sized blogs. Then pitch article ideas to those blogs and get published. So, refining your pitches, reading the guidelines, pitching in the right way, and then hopefully getting published. And then finally, of course, you want to cultivate the relationships that you build with editors, and then, be opportunistic. If an editor, is assigning you more and more work, take advantage of it. And then if nothing else, you'll have a great reference, you'll have a great article, a great piece for your portfolio. All right, so that's going to conclude the actual webinar portion. I hope it's been really enjoyable for you. I've tried to pack as much knowledge as possible into here. So we're going to open up the Q&A. I'll be taking questions for about the next 20 minutes or so. I want to make sure that I answer as many questions as possible, because once I get through the webinar, we often have a lot of questions about things that maybe I didn't go into super into depth because of time constraints. So if you have questions on any of the material that I talked about, please do ask them below, and we'll get to as many as we can. Let me quit screen sharing. All right, there we go. So yeah, if you have questions, please do ask them. I'll be hanging around for, like I said, about the next 20 minutes to answer all of your questions. Let's see what some questions are. Oh, we have a very, very good question from Trevor, who asks, what do you think about simultaneous pitches, doing the same pitches as several blogs? That is a fantastic question. I highly, highly discourage that. And the reason is, and of course, this is something I could talk about for a while, but I'll try to distill it. When anymore, the writing landscape is very competitive, right? And if you've looked for work, this firsthand. And it can be really hard to get work. It can be really hard to make yourself stand out from everyone else. And one way in which you can make yourself stand out from everyone else is doing things that other writers aren't doing. And one of those things is creating content that is really customized, really tailor-made, because what blogs are looking for these days is content that is great for their blog. They don't want an article that could be on someone else's blog, because then they're like, oh, just go pitch to that blog, right? Blogs want content that is unique to them, and the more unique you can make your content, the higher of a chance you'll have of getting published. And really, in a lot of cases, if you can write an article that could be perfect for 10 blogs, then you've really written it for no blogs. It's kind of that old saying, if you build something for everyone, it's really for no one. You want to specialize instead of generalize, and that's going to give you much better chance of getting published. And I think there's just a lot more problems that come with simultaneous pitching. And I get the idea. I get that it's more efficient in theory, but in practice, it just it forces your work to be less customized for each blog that you're pitching to. So my advice would be, pitch one blog with one article idea that you've made just for that blog, because it might seem like it's more of a time investment, it's more of a risk, but in reality, what you're doing is setting yourself up for success. So that was a great question. Thank you for asking that, Trevor. Oh, it looks like you also asked what defines a blog. I kind of went over that in the beginning. Just defining blog writing is pitching to sites that accept content from freelancers. So a blog is just sort of a shorthand term for any online publication. So like Forbes is a good example of a blog, but also Apartment Therapy is. It ranges from it runs the gamut, and that's why I kind of wanted to give a really overall term to use to discuss this. Here's a good question from Dinah, who asked, I always wondered who pays the blog writer. Is it true that blog writers only get paid by ads? That is something that some blogs do, and it's not a really good business model. Really not good for the writer, because then you're only, you're leaving it up to chance how much you get paid. I haven't seen that, thankfully, a lot anymore. It's really been kind of phased out because blogs are realizing that in order to get better content, they need to, they need to appeal more to freelancers. And so what blog writers will usually do is what blogs will usually do is have a budget set aside just for paying writers to come write content for them. And of course, that content ideally will help them build an audience, get their name out there more. And so that's sort of how they profit off of that. If you find a blog that offers to pay by ads or offers like a bonus or something like that, I would highly advise against that, because there are so many blogs that offer just flat rates that are no fuss, that will say, hey, write an article for us, we'll give you money. And that's the kind of relationship you want to have. If it's something really convoluted where it's like, oh, for every 100 views on your post you'll get this much, that's not the kind of blog you want to be writing for. So very good question. Thank you for asking that. Let's see. I have a question from Audrey, who asked, if your ultimate goal is to get a book published, is this a good route to take? I think it can be. It not necessarily, but it's all about your approach. And I think actually this question could be kind of expanded to, if your goal is blank, is this a good route to take? I think that blog writing is, like I talked about it in this webinar, as sort of an end goal in itself, right? But you can have goals, of course, beyond that. And I think this is a really good, and it's a really easy way of getting your name out there, getting your writing out there. So I would definitely recommend it. Yeah, if you want to get a book published, or whatever your goals are, really, I think it's a really good way of, especially if you need to get started, it's a fantastic way of sort of breaking in. But even if you have, maybe if you have some experience, you have some goals already in mind, I think this is a fantastic sort of overall general approach that almost anyone can benefit from. And I'm really passionate about it because, like I said, it really transformed my career. But yeah, so I think no matter what your goal, it's a good approach. Let me see. I have a question from Anna Marissa, who asked, do you have to submit a pitch every time you seek to submit to a blog? For example, if the blog is actively seeking submissions regarding a specific topic, do you still have to pitch your idea? Or can you submit in confidence that the topic has already been narrowed and that they will be interested in it? This is an interesting question, because I think what you're really asking isn't, do you have to pitch every time, but should you pitch every time, or should you should you pitch or should you just submit the entire article? So it's more about pitch versus article, and that can be a double-edged sword. I think that a lot of times, like I've had it happen so many times where I visit sites, I visit blogs that require you to submit the entire article. Like some will not take pitches; they will only take entire articles. And for me as the writer, that's a huge risk, right? Especially if it's a long article. What if I spend an hour, 2 hours writing this article that ends up getting rejected? And since I'm custom, and this goes back to the point that I was making, since I'm tailor making this article for this specific blog, if they reject it, it's not going to be good anywhere else. And so I've just wasted, 2 hours of my time. That's like, potentially a couple $100 just down the drain. So I recommend pitching every time. And I recommend if you find the blog that doesn't accept pitches, then they want the entire article, I would recommend not trying to work with them. Or, I mean, it's so risky. If you're starting out, if you really, really think that they're going to accept your article, then you can, but I really don't recommend it just because it's such a huge risk. There's, the potential to waste so much time and then, have an article that you just can never use again. But yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you for asking that, because I think that's something that a lot of people are wondering about. And so I'm very glad that I was able to talk about it here. Let's see. There are a lot of good questions popping through. I'm trying to decide, trying to sort through them right now. Here's a good question from Marie. She asked, in the few times I've submitted an article, it was through the website and I uploaded the article. I never heard back and there was no way to follow up because it was through a standard form. Are there any tips on how to reach a person for more direct content? Yeah, the writer's guidelines page is definitely the first thing that I would submit, because like I talked about in the webinar, they'll have information about who to contact. So they'll often have, this is the editor you need to contact. And that's a great way to get a hold of people. Otherwise, you might need to check on their like About Us page, or the page that has the list of all the people who work there, all their contact information. Even a Contact Us page might work. But actually, I want to address something else about your question, because you said you submitted an entire article through a standard form, and that's sort of a red flag for me, because like I just mentioned, a site that wants an entire article, that's kind of bad news, because it means you can waste your time, and you can waste a lot of time writing this article. And then also, and this is sort of not that much of a worry, but there's always the chance that if you're submitting to a blog that you don't know a lot about, that maybe seems a little shady, they could just take your content and reuse it, and not pay you for it, just steal it. And that, that's something that you just have to be on the lookout for. I don't think that happens often, if ever, but it is just something that you need to be, thinking about, that you need to be wary about. So if this blog that you were visiting didn't have a writer's guidelines page, if they didn't have a pitching process, then for me that would that would throw up a lot of red flags. So I would just recommend trying to find blogs that have a good writer's guidelines page, have really clear information. If the information is vague on the writer's guidelines page, that usually means that something's up, or that they don't have their stuff together. I'm seeing a couple questions about how many pitches to do per week, and of course that's that will vary for everybody. I think it depends on how much time you have too, because if you're doing this part-time, you'll have a lot less time to pitch than you would if you're just being able to do this full-time. I think a good amount to shoot for is in the 5 to 10 range. And I mean, you could even go maybe in the 3 to 7 range if you're pressed for time, because you don't want to just send like 1 or 2 pitches out a week. You want to be able to put your eggs in a lot of baskets, so to speak. But at the same time, you want to focus on the pitches that you're sending out. You don't want to just be sending out pitches mindlessly. So, for examable, this road-tested pitch template that I'll be sending you, I don't want any of you to just fill it out like paperwork for each blog that you visit and just kind of send them out like like just like a machine gun. You need to still put a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of thought, and deliberate thought into crafting these pitches. So I think the 5 to 10 range per week is a really happy medium for spending a lot of time on the pitches, but then also not spending so much time that you just have to do everything with a cookie cutter template. Let's see. I have a question from Brent who asked, "Do you connect with editors on LinkedIn?" I don't personally, but I don't really think that's a good way of going about it, because that's sort of, when you think about it, an editor has a specific job at the blog, right? And they expect people to come through the channel that they've established for people. And so when you go, if you contacted an editor on LinkedIn, they would probably just say, "Hey, sounds good, submit it using our form." So, it's sort of a roundabout way of going about things. And I also think that it could, in some ways, when you think about it, it's almost a sign of, like, not disrespect, but it shows that you're one of the people that maybe isn't paying too much attention to the rules and the guidelines that they've set for you, and that's why blogs have these writers guidelines, these pitching processes in place, is to create, a system for everyone to go through. And that makes their job a lot easier. If they have, people coming at them from all angles, then it's going to be very, disconcerting, very, they're going to stay busy, so the whole point of this is just saying that, those the pitching process and the submission process that is standard is, standard for a reason. So I would just recommend following that instead of trying, I guess, to circumvent that. But I do understand where you're coming from, and I think that LinkedIn is great for connecting with people, and certainly connecting with people who might be able to help you get started as a freelance writer. But when it comes to editors, I think definitely just go through the submission process that they've set on their site. Let me answer a couple more questions. Here's a good question from Kayla, who I've been talking to recently, and I hope you're doing well, Kayla. She asks, "What happens if you pitched but the blog doesn't respond back after the follow-up email?" So this is a really good question. What happens if you follow up and they don't respond to that follow-up? Most cases, that just means that you can assume they're not interested in it. I've never done more than 2 follow-ups, and I think even that's kind of pushing it, because if they don't respond after one, you can just generally assume that, unfortunately, they're not interested in the article. And of course, that puts you in a tough spot. But what I try to do is look at those rejections, and I ask myself, what didn't work here? And I think that's an important part of this process too. Look at your successes and say, what went right here? How can I replicate that? And then, of course, compare that with your failures and say, why are these 2 different? Why did this one succeed and this one didn't? And then that's how I made the pitch template that I'm going to be sending you. That's how I refine my approach as a blog writer. And that's going to be just integral when you're going through the same process. You want to be able to analyze both your successes and your failures, and then ultimately find what works for you. I have a really good question from Deborah, who asked, "How do you track your pitches?" Something that I always recommend is to use an Excel spreadsheet, or a Google spreadsheet. It's a really handy way of tracking your pitches, because then you can have columns for pitches sent, the status of the pitch, the name of the editor, the contact information. It's really, I think, the perfect way to keep track of pitches. Something else that you may want to do is, if you're not pitching a lot, you can just keep it all in your email. If you're someone who can remember things and has a good kind of mental Rolodex, then it won't really be a problem to just keep it all in your email, and then remember to follow up and maybe make a note to yourself. I do think that the spreadsheet method is a lot more, kind of scientific almost. It's a lot more reliable. Let's see. I wanted to shout out Fozzie Moon, I hope I'm saying your name right, who says, "I just want to say thanks to Jacob and Ian using the pitch template. I'm writing for a website and getting paid for it after 3 years. That is awesome. That is exactly the kind of success story we love to hear. I'm so glad that it was useful for you, and I hope that it'll be useful to a lot of you, others who are maybe haven't started pitching yet. So I hope that gives you a little bit of confidence in the quality of the pitch template, because I know it's worked for me." We have a question. Oh, this is a question from Brooke, who asked, "Do you have a class on how to make a portfolio?" We do discuss that in our No BS course on freelance writing. That's sort of our beginner course, or our flagship course, rather, that hits all the points of how to write online today. And the Breaking the Blog Writing course, of course, that's going to show you just how to build a portfolio by getting work, like I've talked about here. Let me answer. I think we have time for 2 more questions, then we'll have to call it a day. Let's see. Oh, here's a good question from Fazila, I hope I'm saying that right. I'm not the greatest with names, despite being a writer. Who asks, I want to apply as a freelance writer in some international firm. Does it require a work visa? As far as I know, I don't think that being a freelance writer requires a visa. I believe that only applies if you are working physically in another country. I'm not too sure about that. I'm definitely not a lawyer or an expert on that. So but I don't think so. Let's. Oh, here's a good question from Tika, who asks, if you have multiple skills, does that help? I think it can, but I wouldn't be worried about it, because at the end of the day, we're all writers. That is our skill. And sure, if you have other skills, that can help. But I think it can really help insofar as it can help you in terms of credibility. Like, let's say you're a mountain climber and you've been climbing for 20 years. If you want to write an article about mountain climbing, then that experience, that skill is going to come in handy. It's going to back you up. It's going to make you more credible. And if you're talking about skills like, research skills, or maybe photography skills or something like that, that can sometimes help, because some publications, some blogs do want images with their writing, especially if you get into journalistic stuff. That's really big. But for the most part, I think it doesn't really matter. I think it doesn't necessarily help, but it certainly doesn't hinder you. But like I said, at the end of the day, we're focused on selling our writing. We want to make sure that we're focusing on that part, because if you have good writing, then you don't need anything else. And that's sort of what I talked about in the beginning. You don't need portfolio or an experience if you have good writing. So that's absolutely the foundation for everything that not only this webinar is built on, but just writing in general. If you want to be a writer, you have to really hone that skill. And having other skills certainly helps, and it's going to help you in the long run. But if you don't, don't worry about it. Use what you have, is what I would say. So a bunch of great questions. Thank you all so much for asking them. I think we'll call it a day. I don't want to keep any of you for too long. If you have questions, if maybe you're watching this later or yours didn't get answered, feel free to send us an email and we'll answer all the questions that we get. It's support@writinglaunch.com is our email. We'll try to, we check it pretty regularly, so you should receive a response in a day or two. And if you have any questions on the material that I covered today, please do ask me. I'll be more than happy to answer. Like I said, we have those 3 bonuses coming your way over the next few days, so keep an eye out in your email for that. And I really hope they will be of value to you. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for spending the last hour with me. Hope you have a wonderful weekend and keep on writing.